How should Christians think about educating their children? As if parenting were not hard enough, this is a question that every Christian parent has to answer when their kids come to age, is where are they going to send their kids to school? Or are they going to homeschool them? So there's different options, and the opinions that different Christians have are really strong. Listen to just three of them. A terrible crisis has developed in public schools, and they are broken beyond repair. Now is the time for Christians to seriously consider withdrawing from public education. Provide your children with Christian education or homeschooling. Ray Moore, the founder of the Exodus Project, says, "It's time for a new exodus and a new cry for the people of God to let my children go." So Ray Moore likens this situation to Moses crying out to Pharaoh on behalf of the Israelites, "Let my people go." To him, sending your kids to public school is like sending your kids to be enslaved. Contrast this with a different title and an article that appeared in Christianity Today by Jennifer Slate. The title is this: "Why We Send Our Kids to the Poorest Public School." I'll just share one sentence from it. "It's not just my own kids' well-being that matters anymore." Just to make you feel a little more guilty. Last one. This is not from a Christian parent, but it demonstrates how strong people's opinions are about the education of kids. If you send your kid to a private school, you're a bad person. And the author of this article in the first line says, "Send your kids to public school. Even if you can afford private, future generations will thank you." Now, it's evident in just these few lines from these three different authors that the way that people are thinking about this is extremely different. And so what I want to do in this video is just help you in how you think about this. I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I think we'd agree that it's important how you decide how you're going to educate your kids. It's not like deciding which park to go to in the afternoon, or who's going to be your kid's swimming instructor, or what type of weed eater to buy. This is a big deal. It's not the gospel. It's education doesn't save anybody's soul. However, this is a formative, shaping situation that every parent has to consider, and so we want to think about it wisely. We want to think about it Christianly. So we would all agree with this, that God has called every Christian to love Him, to love God with all their heart, soul, strength, and mind, and to love their neighbor as their self. So this double love is the responsibility of every believer. God has also given us the Great Commission. In Matthew 28:18-20, it says, "And Jesus came to them saying, Therefore, go and make all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Behold, I will be with you always until the end of the age." God's called Christians to walk in wisdom. God has said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And God has told us, as Christian fathers specifically, to raise our children in the wisdom instruction of the Lord. So that's from Ephesians. Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 and 7 are what a lot of private school and homeschooling parents will refer to, about the responsibility of Christian parents to pass on their faith to the next generation. And anybody who loves Christ and has been changed by the gospel wants to see their kids and other people's kids changed by the gospel as well. And so as well-meaning believers come to this task, we all want to see the gospel go forth to the next generation. The question is, what's the best way to do it? So there's four options here. Number one, you can send your kids to public school. Number two, you can send your kids to a private school that's an open admission school. Sometimes it's called an evangelistic school. And so this would be an environment where the student doesn't have to necessarily be a Christian, or the family doesn't necessarily have to be a Christian. So for example, two homosexual parents could send their kid to a private open admission Christian school. They don't have to be living a Christian lifestyle necessarily. The students don't have to sign any sort of covenant that they're going to live by a particular moral code. Contrast that with a private closed admission school, or you could also call it a covenant school or discipleship school. Now, these are Christian families explicitly. So they have to be living a repentant, confessing Christian lifestyle. And the students have to sign a covenant that they're going to adhere to the moral code of Christianity on campus and off campus. And so there would be moral repercussions for students who don't adhere to that covenant. This just happened within the last year. A student, I believe it was in Pennsylvania, she was a senior in high school and she got pregnant and she wasn't allowed to walk at graduation. And so at a closed admission or covenant or discipleship private school, that's within reason to do because the student has signed the covenant. And then lastly, you can homeschool. You can decide the curriculum and the parents school the children within the home or in some sort of co-op. Now, there are hundreds of variations of all of this, but those four, public, private open, private closed, and homeschool, those four are the main views. Okay, so here's how I'm going to spend these next 14 minutes. I'm going to give my background, the evaluation criteria that I'm going to use on each of the four options. I'll evaluate each of the four, and then I'll give a conclusion on what I think is the best option for how you should educate your kids. So my background, I was educated in public school, K through 12. I grew up in a rural area in Indiana, so it was not in a city, about 30 minutes from the city. I became a follower of Jesus Christ at the age of 21. So was raised with maybe a concept of God, but not any sort of explicit instruction about here's how you obey Christ in every area of your life. God was mostly irrelevant in my upbringing. But at the age of 21, the gospel did change my life. And that was during my education in an all-male private liberal arts college in Indiana. Also, I did my master's in education at a liberal Catholic university in Indianapolis. And I'm currently doing my Master of Divinity at a Southern Baptist seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. So in terms of my own education, I've been to both public and private school. I haven't had any experience with homeschool personally. And then since college, I've taught in both public schools, and I currently teach in a private open admission Christian school. And so in summary, I've attended the different schools, I've taught in the different schools, and I now have friends that are going through homeschool. And so after considering my own experiences and reading about 15 different resources on this topic, I've come up with a few different criteria for how I'm going to evaluate each of the four views. My criteria are based on just thinking about this, reading the verses in the Bible that speak about education. The main texts that people are going to go to are Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 and 7, which say, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down and when you rise." So this is Moses speaking to the people. This is Moses' last sermon as the people are entering into the promised land. And Moses is saying, hey, you need to be different than the other nations. Here's how you need to do it. So he's encouraging them to educate their kids in a way that is pleasing to God.